Both of the Badgers' newest commits bring something unique to this class. Let's talk about what that is on Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. I'm your host, Ryan Harris, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's bring that guy, Brian Smith, recruiting insider, fan favorite. I always get good comments when you're on the show, man. People appreciate the authenticity. We've had two commits since we've last been able to talk. I want to start with your favorite position, defensive line, Drayden Pavey, 6'3", about 305, 310, coming out of Taft in Cincinnati, Ohio. What were your thoughts on Pavey committing to the Badgers after seeing some of the film?
Well, I was a little bit surprised because Drayden is the profile that you're looking for if you're an elite Power 4 program historically. Somebody like Georgia or Ohio State, whatever, 6'3", 6'4", 290 plus, and can move. As the saying goes, there aren't enough of those guys. So if you get one, you're in good shape, whether they're already technically sound or not. And I'll have some comments on that. But you look at his frame, and just like him standing there before a snap, you're like, that looks like a major Big Ten player. And he could play offensive line or defensive line, wouldn't matter. He'd be good. But physical, quick, athletic, and just like that barrel chest, it stands out. So I think he's a 3 tech at minimum. He could play 1 tech, depending on how much they run a multiple front. It's so complex with what Wisconsin does, and that's good. Can he 2 gap? I don't know, because that's a mentality as much as anything, and he prefers at Taft, where he's at in Cincinnati, to get up the field and try to create havoc. The good news is he can sink his hips after he's in the backfield and go right or left. Most big guys, if a running back gives them a hard head and shoulder fake, it's over. He can actually trail and make a play and force from the backside. I was surprised at his athleticism and flexibility. The only other thing that I really noticed, again, with the big barrel chest, when he wanted to, he's a guy that can put one hand into a player's chest and get going. I'd like to see a little, like he gets too wide with his 2 hands on a guy, needs to be a little more inside. He can maximize a lot more with bull rush and whatnot, which is usually the other way around. But he gets up the field one way or the other because he's got effort. When guys that weigh 290 and up have effort, you got a chance.
And you're going to bring it up with the technique, but watching him, he also does a really good job with his hands. He's able to get off blocks, disengage. A lot of kids at that level, you've seen him, and you see more than most. They just win because they're bigger, faster, stronger than the opposing high school kid. He's disruptive. Like, he already has some ability to get off blocks, to shed, to rip through. I thought it was really impressive seeing the growth he made from last year to this year.
I thought it was interesting watching him on a few plays where, like, he would diagnose, get on the guy that you think, oh, he's getting blocked, and then he would shed that guy real quick. I don't know if he's playing games with them or if it's based on their play. I don't know anything about that high school program, but sometimes he just went for the gap, and other times he was real conservative. So he's an intelligent player that adjusts. Again, if you have that kind of size and strength and you've got effort, once the technique and whatnot comes into play in Wisconsin, I have faith in their staff, especially in the front 7, to get that done. This is a kid that can play as a redshirt freshman at Wisconsin and like be a player. And to put it in perspective, because I pick on Wisconsin's D-line recruiting all the time, this is one of the best D-line recruits I've seen them get in several years in terms of his ceiling. Can't teach the frame, can't teach the natural want to, the effort. Now it's just finding the niche. Again, I don't know how much they're going to 2 gap, because sometimes they run as a guy directly ahead of the center and they'll have him do that. You can probably expand a little bit. Remember, a few years ago, they were a true 3-4 defense at that massive nose guard, like 2021 or whatever it was. You could do a little bit of that with him because he's 290 plus already. What is Wisconsin's strength and conditioning program going to do? Well, it's going to lean him out and add another 10, 15 pounds. He's going to be 6'3", 310 in some, especially teams like Northwestern, Purdue, whatnot. They're not going to be able to do anything with him, and they will engulf their run game. He changes your front and what you can do, fronts as it is, because you put him up on a guard or a center head up, or you can play him in a gap. They don't know what's coming play to play. That's really big pain in the butt to prepare for.
Let me ask you this, because I'm mostly on track with you. We were talking before the show. We both really like Pavey's film. We both like the upside. He's already 300 pounds, so you don't have to project the frame. Why do you think he's maybe a little under the radar, right? Mid 3-star type prospect, originally committed to Purdue. Where did he fall through the cracks potentially?
There's 2 or 3 things that traditionally happen. Weight to the game is possible. The high school he's at's not a program that traditionally has a ton of guys. And maybe it's a circumstance he's been banged up at some point. I don't know. But beyond that, like, if there's any position that gets more leeway, it's D-line. There aren't enough of them. Even if the kid's a pain in the butt off the field, most coaches are, there just aren't enough. You have to have them. You have 0 shot to win big without them. So it is a little weird. And he's from Cincinnati. Like, if you're a Midwest program, you have to recruit Cincinnati. Everybody does. Penn State, Michigan State, Wisconsin. Doesn't matter. So I was a little surprised by that, but I don't know the specifics. My guess is it's one of those, though.
Yeah, last one on Pavey really quick, because I think it is a big-time commitment and worth kind of expanding. You had mentioned before the show, this feels like if this guy had gone to a Michigan or a Penn State, you wouldn't bat an eye with his talent level.
No, there are 4 major recruiting powers in the Midwest: Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame. If he goes to any of those 4, I think he would play. So if that box is checked, you raised your program's trajectory at Wisconsin.
Love it, man. All right, let's jump into the other one. In-state tight end Emmett Bork commits 6'6", 240-ish. They split him out wide a lot. Good hands. Split him out wide all the time, essentially. What's your take on his film?
It was interesting because he's playing against kids that have 0 shot against him. He's maiming small children part of the time. It's hilarious. Some of those corners on him, I'm sure their parents are worried that he's going to get slapped between 2 pieces of bread and eaten. It's hilarious, the size difference. And they throw those fade balls to him, and he still gets around them quick. He's not like super fast, but he's a little twitchier than I thought he would be. And he'll stack the DB, and he's got legit hands. Like, where did Bork get those hands? Like, that is NFL level stuff. Because a few of those passes, well, not bad. It was a very small window for how he was going to get that. His footwork and his reach and his timing had to be perfect. And he caught it like right before he go out of bounds in the end zone or something. Natural pass catcher. What I really liked, though, was him as a blocker. Again, the kids he's going against, he'll face better walk-ons by a mile at Wisconsin. But he's maiming them. He's pushing them off the ball, and sometimes if he had to seal them, he just did it. He could have killed a few kids because they lined up inside. He blocked down. But he's very consistent, and he likes it. I think he can be a traditional Wisconsin tight end, and they've usually got some big plotters that pound guys, but not many of them catch the football like him. I didn't know who this guy was until you sent it to me. I'm like, who's this? Pretty good all-around football. Only thing I'll say is he's not the fastest guy. They need to loosen his hips a little bit in strength and conditioning program, get him a little faster, but he's the kind of guy that can start at Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching his film. His route tree is basically the 9 route. Like, just
they don't. That offense probably has a quarterback that's not great. They can't throw in general, so they're not going to spend a lot of time on it. If we're going to throw it, we're going to get the most for our money. You don't have anybody over there that can guard a 6'5" receiver who's really a tight end, but we're going to throw it to him and call him a receiver. Like you said, he's lined up outside, 80% of the time. So there's just nobody at the high school level that can do anything about that. Honestly, I'm surprised more high school teams don't do that.
Yeah, it's the thing with him that's interesting to me, and you hit on it, is the blocking. Like, is he going to block well enough to be that inline tight end, or because he's not twitchy enough to be that ultra flex guy? Like, I think that's going to be just the development to track it, but I think the hands play either way.
At worst, he is your second tight end, H-back guy. Like, he's better blocking down than he is taking on a 248-pound outside backer that's a fifth-year senior. I'll take the athlete on the defense. Blocking down, angle block, effort, screens. Like, you could put him at the head of the triangle on a bunch formation, run one of those receiver screens. He's going to give you everything he's got. He's going to get stronger, and he hasn't been coached to be in that kind of offense yet. He probably doesn't have any idea how to block outside. They never asked him to. If it goes outside, he's getting the ball. So his ceiling there is pretty high compared to where it's at, because right now he doesn't know much. Needs a lot more strength. He's going to add 15, 20 pounds. My guess is he'll be a nice role player for Wisconsin, not necessarily an NFL guy, but he'll play, and he could start at some point in his career.
Yeah, and listen, as we both talked about, that tight end depth chart for Wisconsin hasn't been the strongest the last couple of years. So you add in a pretty high floor kind of kid that has a couple carrying skill sets. It makes sense. All right, we're going to take a quick second for our friends of the show. We're going to come back and talk about Wilderness and Telemach decommitting and why it leaves a pretty big hole, literally, in this Badgers recruiting class. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at 5 Hour Energy. Listen, 5 Hour Energy knows what it's like to be a fan. It takes a lot, right? Powering through tailgates, getting your stuff set up, long seasons. The grind is real, man. It takes a lot. That's why 5 Hour Energy is here to fuel your fandom with a limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy. This is going to help you get through all the difficulties of being a fan, from waking up in the morning, getting those nachos ready, all the way through the late kick action. FanDuel, or 5 Hour Energy is here with their Stand the Fan to help you get through those specific moments that bring you the passion and joy that makes being a fan incredible. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires a ton of heart, soul, dedication. And whether you're prepping for the big tailgate, ironing your jersey, getting your game day ready, they are here for you. That's why Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. 5hourenergy.com, ship nationwide. Fuel your fandom. Stand the Fan limited edition 5 Hour Energy in a 12-pack. All right, let's get back into the show with Brian. Talk a little bit about a guy that, listen, we talked a lot about Wilderness and Telemach on this show. When he committed, we talked about him again when some of the senior film came out, when he transferred high schools, decommits from the Badgers. Big picture, early thoughts. What does that do to this class, and why is that a loss, or why is it not a loss?
6'6" frames are hard to find. Wisconsin's not exactly in the A list of recruiting those kind of defensive linemen. I need to see more from them in that regard, and I also need to see Wisconsin get some more edge. Like the game against Penn State's a prime example. I had the stat up a minute ago. I don't know if I still have it, but they had I want to say 3 tackles for loss, something like that. They didn't have any PBUs. So it's the edge, corner, and definitely defensive end. Are you getting enough guys that not just good, but are elite players at those spots? Right now, let me ask you, Ryan, does Wisconsin have a first 3-round corner or D end?
Not right now in D end. Maybe Lucas becomes a top 3-round corner.
He's a freshman. That's what I'm saying. They don't have an upperclassman like that, so they haven't recruited enough of these guys. I agree with you about him, by the way. He's going to be a really good player for them. Yeah, I'm looking. They had 3 tackles for loss. They got 1 sack against Penn State. I don't know how this is possible. They didn't get a single pass breakup. They don't create negatives in big plays on defense. And you can't tell me that defensive staff isn't good. Like some of the guys that came over from Cincinnati. I know Badger fans don't want to hear this. This is way more a personnel problem than it is a coach problem, which unfortunately is a lot slower to fix. Mm-hmm. I'm just the person that gives the info. The good news is they could get some guys through the portal, but losing a guy like Telemach is a problem to me because you got to take your shot. Is he great? No. Is he a long-term possibility? Maybe. But I don't see any reason for them to want him to part ways, because who are you getting even remotely similar to him? I don't know. So that's a concern. They got to get some more 6'5" guys on the edge that can really go, or, maybe move inside on 3rd and 8. Telemach could have done that. To me, that's a loss.
Well, and to your point, we've talked about this a ton, right? You just have to stack bodies there. And not all of them are going to work out, which is why you have to stack bodies there. And that body type is unique. What did you think of his film this year that you've seen? Because I know some people have maybe wanted a bigger jump from him.
I don't think he's finished physically. I don't know how big. I don't know if he's going to get 280, 285. I don't know. He's probably a strong side end for sure. They can play some interior, but he's got a lot of drive. And I know the kid personally. He's got a ton of effort. He's not going to hurt your program. At worst, he's going to be a nice role player for you. And that's okay too, because the way Wisconsin now plays defense, they need to rotate a ton of guys because they try to get upfield, and they'll do more as they gain talent, like Cincinnati did, where they get aggressive with the blitzes and stuff. I'm surprised they didn't really want to try to keep. Maybe they'll still go after him. I don't know, but I like this senior film. I think it's good effort. It's just you have to remember this is not a finished product. It's nowhere near. What does the frame tell you? This kind of kid that Florida State, Florida, Miami made a living on in the 80s and early 90s. Kid didn't play much freshman, sophomore, redshirt freshman year, sophomore year played a little. third year starts to do something, then his senior, fifth year senior, okay, this is our second string guy behind the guy who goes second round to the Broncos or whatever. But he's a good player. That's how they won. When they had a guy injured, they could at least get through a game or two with a player like Telemach. So Wisconsin doesn't have the second round pick in front of him. I mean, that's just reality. So I need to see more elite D-line recruiting, and losing a guy I just don't think is positive.
Well, and certainly Pavey's a good start, but it does feel like maybe 2 steps forward, 1 step back a little bit in that situation. Talk to me about Penn State. Let's shift gears. Obviously, we hit on the lack of disruptive plays from the defense. That game was into the fourth quarter, 14-13. The Badgers were nominally in it. But what were your thoughts coming out of that game? Because it also felt like Penn State kind of put them in a crock pot in the second half.
There are several. Number one, the athleticism outside the tackle box, again, is obvious on both sides. Penn State's more athletic. I thought their secondary in particular showed itself. I mean, guys like Washington, King, Reed, Wheatley, all those guys they have. Like Washington's a kid he's from Florida that I know, and he was a track guy. Wisconsin didn't have enough of those, and it showed in special moments where it's a bang-bang play, like on a pass, or to make a tackle instead of a 5-yard gain, you get 3. Penn State ended up with over 400 yards of offense, even though they played a backup half the game, and it's just athleticism. I mean, you've got probably a guy that at least have a cup of coffee in the NFL at running back, and he averages less than 3 yards a carry. That tells me how bad it is outside, because Penn State had zero fear that you were going to do anything against them in the passing game. And to that point, I mean, the numbers, my God, they're terrible. For Wisconsin's passing game, you're 22 of 42 for 217 yards. I mean, that's just brutal. So you're 5 yards of pass attempt. That's criminal. If Walker is at Ohio State, in a normal year, they got 2 great backs. He could be a starter there, but he had 59 yards on 22 carries. It's just like they're so limited offensively. Your point earlier about tight end is a big part of it. It's weird to me that a power team like Wisconsin can't find a play action tight end. That blows my mind. But they haven't had one that's consistent, at least for a long time, and that showed up. But outside the numbers, man, they just got engulfed. And I think that's the biggest thing. I was flipping channels and watching it, but I'm like, the difference between Wisconsin and the next tier in the Big Ten is really stark outside the box.
Let me ask you this, and this is probably impossible to answer. How much of this is a quarterback thing, and how much of this is they don't have enough pieces around them? Like, would this be any different, in your opinion, if Tyler Van Dyke didn't get hurt, for example? Maybe he's not the best example because he's not necessarily the answer.
Yeah, he's not the answer either. But
is it as simple as you need a more dynamic quarterback?
That would help. I mean, you don't need a guy that runs a 4.35, but they need somebody that consistently. I cover Florida State. Both the guys they're young, they're not very good yet. They can motor. If you miss a fit on an RPO and they run around the end, that's 20 yards. They can't throw for crap sometimes because they make one early decision. If it's not there, they take. I mean, they're nowhere near ready. They'll screw up a play and get 20 yards. So Wisconsin doesn't have that ability. The kid at South Carolina has no idea what he's doing. If you haven't seen him, a big kid, you better be ready. He'll truck you and he'll run around you. When your offense is struggling, a quarterback that can do that is important. The kid at Alabama, I don't think he's ever going to figure it out. Do you want to get in front of that? I don't. He's 230 and he's a freight train. Wisconsin doesn't have that either. So when the receivers, they're solid. I think they're better than people give them credit for. But when the receivers go against NFL level DBs, in Penn State has that, no doubt. When they're going against that, and you don't have a running back that's getting much room because they're sucking everybody into the box, your quarterback's not mobile, man. He better be pinpoint accuracy, and obviously Locke is not. There's just not many play calls that's going to work for that. What are you calling? You got to get lucky on a screen, a penalty, a busted coverage, and Penn State's pretty sound. Where were the big plays? There weren't. And if you thought that was bad, now you're going against Iowa's cover 2 defense. They're not giving up anything over the top. They're the most sound football team on defense in the country every single year.
Yep, that they are.
So
let me ask you this. This was interesting, right? Because obviously Penn State goes to the backup quarterback. They go to Prebula. Drew gets hurt at halftime. And you just see the mobility that he brings to the field. He's a good quarterback. He made some throws too.
100%.
But you see what that mobility does on those RPO fits to the Badgers defense. And up to that point, I thought was playing Penn State pretty well. You hold Penn State to 7 points at halftime. I don't think you could expect more out of the defense.
Well, let me see here. Just from a statistical perspective, I mean, Katron had the 124-yard run in the fourth quarter. We'll get back to talent in a second. Singleton's best run was 18. They did a pretty good job. They tackled pretty well because both those guys are going to get paid. Okay, both of them are. But at the same time, here's the difference. They had to put more effort into that while still being scared to death because Penn State's tight end is really good. That he was going to beat you if you suck in the linebackers and safeties. And they're okay at receiver. They're not where they need to be, but Penn State's better than Wisconsin, probably just pure talent. But they've got two such good running backs. They haven't had to use them. And again, I think Wisconsin's receivers are a little better than given credit for, but there's just not enough room for those guys to run. Wisconsin has the ball and you're in 3rd and 6. You go against dime coverage against Penn State with that pass rush and those athletes. Wisconsin's not built for that. So they're not winning enough in the box against those teams that have more skill talent. And I think Locke's a pretty good player. He's limited like his long-term ceiling, but they just don't have the players to make that work any better than it is. I don't think there's much they can change this year. They're going to be lucky to score 20 points against any really good defense like Penn State. Like that's a top 10 D. But I'm not surprised by the way this went.
Speaking of good defenses coming up, let's talk about the Iowa game next. How Wisconsin can go into Kinnick at night and maybe get the victory. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show, long-term friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is a great spot if you are looking to spice up your sports weekend. Parlays, futures, teasers, spreads all over there at FanDuel. This line is hovering around -3 for Iowa, +3 for Wisconsin. If you're interested in that action, you can head over to FanDuel.com. Again, big game coming up, and you can find all that action over at FanDuel. $5 bet gets you $150 bonus bets guaranteed if you win. That's over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. NFL's going on, NBA is rolling, college basketball is about to start. Obviously, college football in the home stretch. A great time to go spice up your sports weekend. Do it responsibly over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's jump back in with a recruiting insider and all-around college football guru, Brian Smith. Going to Kinnick this weekend. This is a big game for the Badgers, sitting at 5-3. We know Oregon is still looming. That's going to be a loss. Then you have Minnesota, Nebraska. This is a huge game if Wisconsin is still potentially trying to get to 7 or 8 wins. What's your early read, Wisconsin heading into Iowa?
Well, unless this is very similar to Penn State without as much pure speed on offense. Like Iowa's offense is still dreadful. They're, I think, 124th in passing. I mean, they're garbage. But at the same time, that Johnson kid at running back, holy crap, he's got 16 touchdowns. He hasn't had a game this year without a score. He's only had 2 games where he didn't get 100 yards, and they can't throw. Their O-line is not Iowa standard, and he's still getting – this is a very – like he's good enough to start at Georgia kind of player, but he's just stuck at Iowa. Could you imagine what he could do at like in Texas with all their receivers?
7.84 per carry. Like he's a freight train, and he's got long speed. He's got deceptive long speed.
He would be averaging 8 yards a carry at Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He's averaging 7 at Iowa, and everybody knows he's getting the ball. So yeah, he's really good. That's the first thing. So here's the $1 million question. Can Wisconsin play 6 in the box if they're in spread and keep Iowa to under 4.5 yards a carry? Because they're going to mix it up. They're still going to run traditional stuff that Iowa does. But when they spread them out, that's what makes me nervous. Because like you said, great point. Johnson has long speed. If he hits a crease on an inside zone or a draw or something, that one play changes. If they get up early, like 10-3 going into half, and you've struggled offensively, yeah, that's not good, especially if he's grinding on you. Back to the Penn State game, the biggest 2 runs for Katron, he had a 24 and a 19, both in the fourth quarter. Why? Wisconsin doesn't have the depth they need. You can't play from behind against Iowa. They're already beat up because you just played Penn State. Huge disadvantage because now you got to turn around and go play another very physical team, obviously a rival. Yeah. I think Iowa should be the favorite just because of that. And they've got the best player probably on the field in Johnson. Like that guy's an NFL player. One other note, because obviously Wisconsin's passing game is a little iffy. If they're going to do anything smart this weekend, do not throw it at this guy. Whoever Jamari Harris is, 3 picks and 6 PBUs, no. Other guy, whoever it is. I know Wisconsin doesn't throw a lot. He's the other guy on that field. Like, you screw around, it goes the other direction. That would be a very bad thing, because then like Braden's confidence goes down. That's my other concern. They've got an NFL. I looked it up. He's a projected top 10 corner on the board in the NFL draft. That makes me very nervous.
Let me ask you this, because you hit on it last segment. Iowa traditionally plays that cover 2. They're going to keep the linebackers on the field. They're going to tackle. They're not going to blow assignments. How does Wisconsin attack that this weekend, considering really their best passing option maybe has been Vinny Anthony streaking behind a defense? I mean, Will Pauling has had some drops this year. You're not going to get that Anthony streak with Iowa. And if Wisconsin struggles running the ball again, what's the game plan to attack this Iowa cover 2 if you're Wisconsin?
You need some shifts and motions. You still got to try to catch him on leverage on the perimeter. And, those, I hate using this analogy, but it's the most common when I was growing up. The 49ers always used to run the West Coast, play action, bootleg, waggle, tight end comes under this 4-yard pass. No corner wants to tackle the 255-pound tight end. He doesn't have to be great if he's that big. You got to beat up on kids like the really good corner at Iowa. Make them regret being in that defense that day. And then also, I know this isn't what Wisconsin normally does. If you're going to pull out any trick plays or any backdoor screens, run one way to run the tight end to the other side, throw, they've got to get a cheap touchdown or a play that sets up one, or I don't think they score 20 points. I don't think you're going to grind out what you need against Iowa, because Penn State's defense is even better. And you stunk it up against their, especially in the second half. Like, Wisconsin just couldn't get it going. Why would I believe you're going to do it against Iowa after you're already beat up? I mean, you're always going to be beat up after playing Penn State. That doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy either. So they need to come up with some big plays. Hopefully the defense can give them, they need at least one cheap touchdown. If they get a pick 6 or something, that's fine too. But they're not going to win this game straight up. They need a bonus touchdown somewhere. Does
this feel like a game played under the 20s, or do you think this game gets into the 20s?
I could see 21-14, something like that. But I don't know what the over-under is, and I'm not a gambler. But if it hits 40, that would be about the highest I think it would get, because I really don't think Wisconsin – I don't know, Wisconsin fans don't want to hear. I don't feel good about Wisconsin in this one. The timing of the game is rough, and they just struggle with Iowa every year to score consistently, which most teams do. But the offensive line's not dominant enough like it used to be to help what you're talking about. Like Vinny, dude, that guy can go. You're not going to draw those safeties up when it's 2nd and 8. They don't care. I don't think they can run consistently on Iowa with their base defense. If I'm right on that, it's going to be a long day for Wisconsin.
And you just mentioned talking a little bit about some of the Wisconsin-Iowa past struggles. You weren't a big fan of the 15-6 Iowa-Wisconsin game last year? Not something that you go back and rewatch often?
No. That's awful football. I can't watch that stuff. That's terrible.
Yeah. There's been several of those. It's old classic Big Ten West football. We're going to wrap it there. He is Brian Smith. Go follow him, FB_Scout_Florida, recruiting insider. As always, man, we appreciate you jumping on and dropping the truth. This is Locked On Badgers. Go check out Locked On Big Ten when you're done. You'll get all the latest conference news over in the Big Ten Network. Tons of content coming up this week still on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.